Western Digest magazines, and fantasy paperback book haul. Hi, I'm Gary Lavisi, and for this episode, we're going to take a look at some really cool books. Not really rare, but not the kind of things you usually see these days. Um, uh, the Western genre at one time was very, very popular. Uh, Paperbacks were published, tons of them, Western paperbacks. Today, it's like almost non-existent. Um, there were very many digest magazines, science fiction digest magazines, and crime digest magazines. We know all about those. Those are very popular. Manhunt, and so many other different things. But there were a lot of Western digest magazines that were published in the 50s, and they're pretty cool. Some of them are kind of hard to find, and they don't show up that often. So we're going to take a look at some of them now. Here's a whole pile of them. All Western, Western Magazine, Gunsmoke, Luke Short's Western Magazine, Spur Western Magazine, Blazing Western. These were, they're not that common these days to find them. And we're just going to look at a few of them. Spur Western Novels, #1 is from Dell. And this has cover art by Bob Stanley. It has stories by Les Savage Jr., Dan Cushman, and Will C. Brown. That's the cover of Spur, #1. Back cover, a little bit about the stories inside. And that's from, actually, it's from 1955. So a lot of these were fairly obscure today. Blazing Guns, #1 from October 1956, has a Walt Coburn story, Frank Bonham, and others. I don't know who did the cover art, but that's Blazing Guns, #1. Luke Short had its own magazine named after him. It was #1. It's from Dell Magazines. #1 is from April-June 1954. It has a Luke Short featured story, Will Henry, George C. Appel. The cover is by Stanley Borak. Very nice Luke Short Western Magazine, #1. Dell Publishing Company, 25 cents. Digest. In the back it has a photo of Luke Short with the contents and what Luke Short says about the magazine. That's the first issue, Luke Short's magazine. The second issue is from October-December 1954. Again, Luke Short has a leader-off novelette, L.L. Foreman, George C. Appel, and other various Western authors. There's a article on Billy the Kid, and Stanley Borak did the cover of this one also. This is Luke Short, #2, again from Dell Magazines. Dell published a lot of magazines and digests, and they were very popular in the Western area. Here's the back cover with the contents. LSM, Luke Short, Western, LSW. It's M from up when I'm looking at it upside down, but it's LSW, Luke Short, Western Magazine. Gunsmoke was a really good Western magazine. It was the Western version of Manhunt. Manhunt published throughout the 50s and 60s, hard crime magazine, and a lot of the authors from that are in Gunsmoke are from Manhunt. You have Noel Loomis, Steve Fraze, A.B. Guthrie, Frank O'Rourke, Jack Schaefer, who wrote Shane, Nelson Nye, Robert Turner, Evan Hunter, Bryce Walton, and Elmore Leonard has a story here, The Boy Who Smiled. And this is number 1 from June 1953, Gunsmoke magazine. And there weren't too many in the Gunsmoke series. I think maybe 4, maybe 6. This is number 2 from August 1953. Again, it has Frank O'Rourke, Jack Schaefer, Nelson Nye, Louise Trimble, Evan Hunter, Robert Turner, Charles Beckman Jr. All of them have stories in here. Again, Gunsmoke was similar to Manhunt. It was put out by the same people in an effort to capture the Western market, as they had captured the Crime Digest market. And they always had nice illustrations with one color on the title and author. You can see they use a little bit of color inside. It was a nice magazine. And that's Gunsmoke, Western magazine. These are all picked up in a book haul recently, and I just want to share them with you to give you an idea of some of the Western magazines that you don't see that much these days, and which were quite common back then, and very not so much collected, but they were read because people enjoyed them. Western magazine, this is number 1, published by Bard Publishing, and it has 5 stories in it. It's from June 1955, and June 1955, that's number 1, Western magazine. Western magazine number 2. These were published by Martin Goodman, who published a lot of the kind of sleazy crime magazines like Two-Fisted and some of those magazines. This one is volume 5, number 1, February 1958, and among the other authors, it contains a Gardner F. Fox story. That's Western magazine, from February 1958. On the back, it has some of the illustrations from inside with the contents, and inside is the first contents page in the first story, and small illustrations, not too many. There's a novel. That's Western magazine. And then the next 5 are magazines put out by Dell, and it's called All Western. And these are pretty nice. This is the April-June 1950 issue, and it contains a story by Ernest Haycox, Eugene Cunningham, and other well-known Western writers. I don't know who did the cover art on this, but I think it was Robert Stanley, because he did the covers on a lot of them. It's a nice magazine. They do inside artwork, and they also do back cover artwork, and each issue inside back cover artwork, which is really nice. Bob Abbott did a couple of the back covers, I don't think this one, but there's a couple others where they do credit them. So if I can find them, I will mention it. Okay, and this is the next one is the August-September 1950 issue. It has mostly Western authors I haven't heard of. It has Henry Sinclair Drago and W.H. Hutchinson and a few others. Nice issue. The cover art is really nice. The inside cover art is by Stevens, and the back cover art is by Bob Abbott. It's signed down here, and it's credited to him on the inside. And on the inside, front, back cover, they have artwork also. So they have some nice, and they have crossword puzzles. It's all Western fiction. These are the dying days of the Pulps, and it's kind of cool that you don't see these that often. The October-November 1950 issue contains 10 stories by authors I've not heard of, but it does have a Bob Stanley cover, and it has a, grasp the paper, inside front cover and a contents page. Bob Abbott did the back cover. He's credited in the contents page, and his signature's there, and there's also back cover art. And some of the stories, there's 10 stories in this issue, so it's kind of filled up. It's all Western. All Western, February, March 1951 has L.P. Holmes, James Hendricks, Ernest Haycox, T.T. Flynn, who's a crime writer, amongst others, and cover art on this is by Bob Stanley. And again, you have the inside cover, inside art, and the inside front cover and contents page. Bob Abbott did the back cover art, signed here. These are really nice with the artwork on the back cover and on the inside, front, and back covers. It's kind of a cool magazine. And you have your stories. T.T. Flynn, really good writer. Ernest Haycox is in some of these issues. He's an incredible Western author. And the last one of All Western is the December 1950, January 1951 issue. It has stories by Harry Sinclair Drago, Frank Bonham, Ernest Haycox, Eugene Cunningham, Bill Gulick, among others. Again, Bob Stanley did the cover art. Robert Stanley. He usually used his wife as his model, his wife Rhoda. Again, with the inside front cover illustration and the nicely designed contents page. Back cover, again with some nice art, and inside back cover art as well. And story, Ernest Haycox story. A nice magazine. These aren't mint copies. I wish they were, but they're just nice copies. You don't find them that often, and it's pretty cool. So that's part of the haul. These were very reasonably priced. The next group is just a few books I want to mention. The 3 books in Catherine Kurtz's Dereni series. From 1970, the first book. These are all paperback originals, first editions. From 1970, Dereni Rising, Valentine Books. From 1972, cover art by Bob Pepper, Dereni Checkmate, and Volume 3 from 1973, with cover art by Alan Martin. And this is Volume 3, High Dereni. This is an interesting series. These are all paperback originals of her first books. They're kind of like medieval books, but set on a different planet. If you like Game of Thrones, you'll probably enjoy these. They're very well done, very well thought of, and a lot of people really enjoy them. And there's more books in the series. These are just the first 3 when she started writing them in 1970. They were published as paperback originals by Valentine Books, and they carry the adult fantasy logo, which they're in that a series which was edited by Lynn Carter for Valentine Books. Another book in that series, the adult fantasy series, but by Evangeline Walton, is The Children of Lyre. That's a first edition from 1971, and has an introduction by Lynn Carter, and again that's in the adult fantasy series Valentine. And when they say adult fantasy series, they don't mean adult as in adult books for sleaze or sex books. They mean adult as far as these are classic, or in the classic vein of serious fantastic literature. Now moving to Pulp, we have Edmond Hamilton Doomstar, which is a nice book that I just found. I picked it up. It was reasonably inexpensive. It's a paperback original from 1964. Edmond Hamilton was the world wrecker. He created Captain Future, and these are just great books. Any Edmond Hamilton space opera is really great stuff. Very different from these books, which are high fantasy. Let me just show you the back covers of the Dereni books. You can see those. And the back cover of the Walton Valentine. And the back cover of the Edmond Hamilton just tells you a little bit about the story. The next book was an interesting book that I found. Paperbacks was a Canadian company that published crime books in the 80s and 90s. A small company, didn't have good distribution, limited distribution. And the book is Red Highway. This is from 1987, and it's a crime noir thriller, kind of based on Bonnie and Clyde and Dillinger. But the interesting thing about this book is, this is, by the way, Lauren Estelman, who was famous for a lot of private eye novels, hard-boiled, and he wrote 2 Sherlock Holmes pastiches, maybe 3 actually, and also the Amos Walker Private Eye series. This is his first book, Red Highway, but it didn't come out under this title. The original one was The Oklahoma Punk by Major Books, which is pretty much a very, very scarce book to find. So that's the original title of this book. But he explains in here that they kind of gave it that title without his knowledge, and he didn't really. Publishers would do that at times. They'd take an author's author's book and republish it. And sometimes they had no idea. They'd say, like, what book is that? You know, Bezarides, who wrote crime noir in the 30s and 40s, Lion Books, took one of his books and retitled it, and he didn't even know. When my wife gave him the book to sign, he says, when the hell did this come out? Where was this book? I never knew about this book. And it turned out that it was his earlier book, I think The Long Haul, but it was under a different title. Harlan Ellison told me one time that when he did his book Rumble, he was in the army as a young man, and he was so happy he got a package from Pyramid Books, and it was a copy of the first printing of Rumble, paperback original. He goes, "What the hell is this?" Because that wasn't the book that he sent them. It was Night in the City, and eventually he got it published under Night in the City, but after many years, and so a lot of times publishers would, and they kind of neglected to tell the authors. It's kind of interesting. It's amazing how the author's usually the last guy to know sometimes, especially when you're first starting out and you're dealing with editors and big publishers and even sometimes small publishers that don't always have a handle on things as they should, and you're dealing with them, and they kind of neglect to let you know sometimes what's exactly what's going on, and they change the title. So here's the first Lauren Estelman's first published book, The Oklahoma Punk, which he just was like, what the heck is that? From Major Books. And then later on, a more a smaller publisher, but an obscure today, but an honest one, brought out the book under his original title, Red Highway, and there's the back cover. So you could just see that sometimes the publishers play a little fast and loose, but it's interesting. Anyway, this was a book haul that I just picked up a few of these things. Some of them I'm going to keep, some of them I'm going to resell or whatever. I'm going to upgrade different things. And it's just figured I'd give you a look at some of the Western digests that they kind of get short shrift these days. Nobody talks about them. They're not really collectible. They're not valuable or anything, but they are really cool. There's a lot of good stuff published in those digests, Western digests, and Western pulps, and they should be remembered, and they should be collected by people. I'm sure there are people that collect them and that treasure them and love them and love the work and the artwork. A lot of people got their start there. Bob Stanley did a lot of work for the covers. Bob Abbott did some of the back covers, and also the books of Catherine Kurtz. I mean, that's her early first books when she started her career as a writer in 1970, fantasy writer. And now she has a long time following of devoted fans. Great work that she's done. And Lauren Estelman, fantastic, excellent crime private eye writer. And Edmond Hamilton, the world wrecker, who created Captain Future and so much more. So there you have it, just a look at some books that I think are pretty cool, and I hope you enjoyed this look at them. And I want to thank you for looking. Give us a thumbs up and a like, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends about it, and thanks again. We'll see you next time.